When I told Rick about one especially busy day I'd had, which was followed by some very bad days in a row, he said, "We would never expect someone with a broken leg to run a marathon." My testing and cognitive work with Rick has been both fascinating and frustrating. Speech language pathologist tells only a small part of what Rick does. He works with me on all things cognitive, all those things that I struggle with, like problem solving, deductive reasoning, pacing myself, as well as actual speech, sustaining a narrative, which falters when the topic is complicated or conceptual or math or emotional. Well, lots of things. But I can do small talk. Ironically, something I never had much patience for before the injury. I don't know any of you, I don't know you. We found that I struggle the most cognitively and in my speech when it's a perfect storm of something complex and emotionally charged, like "How have you been?" or politics, or the war in Iraq, or the relative merits of Yankees versus Red Sox, or some of the more sophisticated interactions with people I love. And worst of all is when there's a time limit. One of my lowest days came after I scored high on some reading comprehension tests. I scored 99%. I had to go for a long walk when I got home, and I felt very blue. And I likened it to when you're a kid and you feel miserable and your mom takes your temperature and it's normal. I wanted to start taking some tests that pinpointed my deficiencies. I wanted somehow to quantify my injury. Those came shortly thereafter. That was the day I remembered the verse from the Bible, "And the Lord turned Job's captivity when he prayed for his friends." And so I walked in big circles in the conservation land, and I prayed for my family and my friends and my colleagues, and I did begin to feel a little better. I coined the term residual intelligence. I didn't copyright it or publish it in a medical journal or anything. I just said it to Rick as something I have because I can still score high on some tests, like reading comprehension or guessing what shape comes next. Using the familiar metaphor, it was like my brain was in traction, but I could still curl 40 pounds. My problem with the results of those tests are that a high score says nothing about the cognitive strain and fatigue you have to fight through while you're taking them, not to mention the harsh fall you take afterwards. I have spent wonderful and hilarious evenings with friends, and my injury has been pretty invisible. And the next morning, Lynn might say, "You did really well last night." And she'd be right. But I always feel compelled to remind her what we talked about. Things like baseball or movies or music. Not to make my friends feel awkward who might see this, but even after those fun evenings, I generally pay a heavy price for days afterwards, all of the symptoms amplified. What is the extent of your brain injury? In sports, you can play hurt, but you can't play injured. You can return to work if you're hurt, but not if you're injured. Who determines the difference in your case? I asked Beth Adams, my case manager, how the decision was going to be made about me going back to work, because I was feeling anxiety about that, and frankly, it was awkward talking to people who saw me on a good day, because I thought they might be thinking, "Now, why can't you work?" I had one friend say, "You can't even work one day a week?" Beth said, "Don't put that on yourself in addition to everything you're going through. You say that your recovery team has not okayed you to go back to work." And that's helped too. These are some things I've blurted out on a bad day. I just want my mind back. I feel broken and defeated. I've forgotten what it feels like to feel good. And I'm not looking for euphoria. I just don't want to feel terrible all the time. One day, I was clearly attempting too much. I drove to Salem to meet with Beth Adams for an hour, and that's after the hour drive to get there. And a lot of that is on Route 128, a pretty stressful highway around these parts. Ask anyone who lives here. And then I still had to go to Boston, so I parked at the train station and I got flustered trying to figure out the new rail pass. Like an alcoholic who, for the first time, admits publicly he has a problem, I told a guy in a transit authority uniform, I have a brain injury and I need help.
I'm going to show you how to add money to a Charlie card. See, this is a machine. It says tickets. Purchase tickets.
Finally, here's some advice for caregivers of TBI patients. Explain that support from family and friends has a huge role in recovery. Encourage them to write down what support means for them. Anticipate how we're feeling and meet us there. That might mean having a box of tissues handy. Understand that we're caught in that catch-22. We're supposed to try and do new things to see how much we can do, so we spend our day gauging whether we're doing too much because we don't want to feel terrible, and we feel terrible if we've done too much. Assure us that what we're experiencing is normal for someone with a brain injury. Assure us that we're not alone, and that we shouldn't be alone. We should avoid isolation. You can say, orchestrate a meeting with a friend yourself if you have to. And I've had some great lunches with one friend at a time. And give us pep talks. We're not above hearing them. Left to our own devices, we quickly become discouraged. You can help our discouragement not spiral into depression. I'll start with a verse from Jeremiah. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith Jehovah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you hope in your latter end. And this prognosis is as true for me as it is for all of you watching this video. Just 4 months after the accident, I asked my neurologist, what if I didn't get better? Or I improved, but then I plateaued short of full recovery. He put my chances at full recovery within a year at 90%, but that there tends to be diminishing returns the longer it takes. And then Rick Sanders later amended that to 85%, and Spaulding actually usually gives a 2 to 3 year window of recovery. The neurologist added that the longer it's taking, the less likely that I'll fully recover, and then he said something surprising. Frankly, I'm discouraged at your progress. Most people would have fully recovered by now. Surgeons are not noted for their bedside manner. Generally, because the MRI, the CAT scan, the EEG were all clean, the prognosis for recovery is still good, although the longer it takes, the flatter the improvement curve.